Welcome to the history section. Following the great victory over the Taira clan in 1185, we see Minamoto Yoritomo accomplish something quite fundamental. He restructures Japanese governance, establishing a center of power that's distinct and functionally separate from the imperial capital in Kyoto.
Yes, and the result is the Bakufu, which translates to tent government. We, of course, more commonly know it as the shogunate.
And it's established in the eastern settlement of Kamakura.
Right. And for you to really grasp the political reality of this period, the Kamakura period, which runs from 1185 to 1333, it's vital to understand it as an arrangement of political duality.
So not an outright replacement of the old order.
Not at all. It was a careful balance. Kyoto, it retained all of its ancient prestige and its legal authority. It was still the seat of the emperor, the home of the nobles, and really the undisputed cultural and spiritual heart of the nation.
Kamakura, then, was conceived as something different, the administrative and, I suppose, the military apex of this new feudal hierarchy.
Exactly. It was the functional seat of the shogunate and served as the political core for the samurai homelands. And this structural duality, it wasn't enshrined by revolution. It was done through law and tradition.
So the justification for Yoritomo establishing the shogun as the ultimate military authority, where did that come from?
It stemmed from a formal, and this is key, a formal and legal delegation of power. This authority, the title of shogun, or Seitai shogun.
The commander-in-chief of the expeditionary force against the barbarians.
The very one. That title was granted directly by the emperor. So what you have is a highly pragmatic division of labor.
Where the imperial court provides the legitimacy.
The essential, irreplaceable spiritual and historical legitimacy, yes. Meanwhile, the Bakufu handles the military command, law enforcement, and all the practical aspects of land administration out in the provinces.
And this arrangement required a whole new administrative center. You mentioned Kamakura. I understand it was just a modest fishing village before this.
Very modest. It underwent a rapid and monumental transformation. Yoritomo chose it for its defensibility and also its proximity to his loyal eastern warrior base. It very quickly evolved into a major political and military settlement.
Housing all the high-ranking Minamoto vassals who would then form the nucleus of this new shogunal bureaucracy.
Exactly. And when you analyze that administration, one of the most striking features is its intentional simplicity, its efficiency, especially when you contrast it with the centuries-old and often quite sclerotic imperial administration back in Kyoto.
So the Bakufu bureaucracy was deliberately streamlined.
It was. It relied throughout its existence on three essential administrative offices. They were known collectively as the Sanbugyo.
The first of these, and in many ways the foundational institution, was the Samurai Dokuro, the Office of Samurai.
Right, and Yoritomo established this office very early on, even before the Tairas were finally defeated. He recognized the need for centralized control over his growing warrior base.
And what did it do, primarily?
Well, it functioned as the military command and police headquarters. Once the war was over, its internal policing and supervision role became absolutely paramount.
So it was managing all strategic military requirements. Recruitment, deployment.
Recruitment, deployment of personnel across the nation, yes. But critically, this office managed all affairs connected with the canon.
The shogun's direct hereditary vassals.
Precisely. If you were a member of that elite warrior class, your entire identity and your loyalty were defined by your relationship with the Samurai Dokuro.
So that's the military arm. The other two offices handled what? Civil and legal governance?
They did. You have the Mando Koro, which was the Office of General Administration.
Yeah.
This was the central executive body. It was responsible for the day-to-day governance, handling finance, land management, so long as it wasn't a strictly judicial dispute, and supervising the operational bureaucracy away from military matters.
And the third office?
The Monchujo, the Office of Inquiry. And its creation introduced a level of sophistication the early imperial system really lacked. This office dealt exclusively with all legal matters and judicial review within the shogunate's jurisdiction.
So separating the legal issues from general administration.
Yes, which created a clear, dedicated path for dispute resolution. This simplicity of structure, military, civil, and justice was a distinct improvement upon the convoluted, often overlapping jurisdictions that you saw in the Kyoto court structure.
But relying on only three major offices, surely their jurisdictions must have blurred at times.
They did, and that became a source of instability, especially during periods of transition. For example, the Monchujo might handle a formal legal dispute, but the Mando Koro often made the final, overriding administrative decision about a land grant.
And the samurai dokuro.
It frequently intervened in police matters, which could quickly become legal matters, particularly when it concerned the conduct of the kinin. So this structural overlap, while it was efficient in theory, required extremely strong and unified leadership at the very top.
Which, as we'll see, was something the Minamoto bloodline ultimately failed to provide. Let's move to the structure of loyalty itself. The bedrock of this whole Kamakura system seems to be the kinin.
It was. These were the shogun's loyal followers, men who were tested in battle and bound by a personal oath of service and allegiance directly to Yoritomo.
And the status of kenin was highly prestigious.
Immensely so. It defined one's place at the absolute top of the feudal society. It wasn't just a rank. It was a contractual relationship, a system of mutual obligation.
So the kinin received protection, land grants, preferential treatment.
And in return, they owed absolute military service. They were subject to the shogun's direct command, and it wasn't merely an inherited title, it could be revoked.
As the most severe punishment possible.
Yes, leading to total social and economic ruin for the entire family.
And because of this immense loyalty, this tested reliability, these were the men entrusted with administration across the wider nation. They'd receive appointments to crucial positions, governorships, direct control over the shuin, the major agricultural estates.
That's right. And the composition of this elite group really reveals Yoritomo's political genius and his willingness to break with tradition. While many were his longtime allies, the kinin also included men recommended by high-ranking officials and, crucially, former enemies. We see clear evidence of samurai of Taira origin being brought into the fold.
In those highly sensitive cases where blood loyalties were in direct conflict with a new allegiance, how did Yoritomo handle that?
He cemented the contractual ties through matrimonial alliances. This practice fundamentally challenged the deeply held traditional samurai code.
A code forged in centuries of clan feuding.
Exactly. The traditional code dictated that a samurai should never live under the same sky as or accept the patronage of the destroyer of his father or his clan. By accepting former enemies into the kinin fold and then formalizing their allegiance through marriage, the shogunate showed its clear priority.
Political stability and military pragmatism overrode the traditional pursuit of vengeance.
It did. It marked an early and very significant shift in the samurai ethos.
Yeah.
A move away from pure clan vendetta and toward a more institutional loyalty.
Now, below the kinin, but just as vital for territorial control, were the operational officials appointed by Kamakura, the Hito, the land stewards.
Yes, and Kamakura specifically appointed Hito to replace the previous civil appointees who had been loyal to the court in Kyoto. This was a direct move to ensure the Hito were accountable to the shogun, securing the shogunate's influence over those traditional estates.
And their function was primarily civil and economic.
That's right. They were the ground-level administrators. They ensured proper land management, they accurately assessed taxes, and they collected revenue from the estates. And for their service, they were rewarded handsomely.
Typically with a portion of the tax revenue they collected.
Yes, and this compensation model was brilliant. It gave the Hito a powerful, vested economic interest in maintaining the efficiency and productivity of the shogunate's system.
And working in parallel with the Hito were the shugo, the military governors.
Correct. Yoritomo would place a shugo over each province, or sometimes a combination of smaller provinces. Their role was distinctly military. They acted as the shogun's strongman, exercising military control and commanding the local forces within their province.
So the shugo were the embodiment of Minamoto supremacy out in the provinces. They controlled the military dimension while, I suppose, operating alongside any remaining less powerful civil governor appointed by Kyoto.
Exactly. And Yoritomo's initial appointment of these shugo guaranteed stability because they were chosen from among the most loyal and powerful kinin. However, history tells us that this concentration of military power in provincial strongmen eventually proved to be a structural weakness.
How so?
These shugo would eventually amass so much localized power, so much land and allegiance that they evolved into the powerful, semi-independent provincial barons who later dominated the nation, the daimyo.
The long-term cohesion of the shogunate couldn't just depend on contracts. It needed a spiritual anchor for that loyalty.
It did, and Yoritomo skillfully tapped into the ancient uji, or clan tradition. This was a system where loyalty was sustained through a connection to a deified ancestor or a clan god.
And for the Minamoto, this deity was Hachiman.
Hachiman, yes. In Shinto tradition, Hachiman is the divine spirit of Emperor Ojin, who is revered as the god of war. Yoritomo meticulously integrated this ancient religious feeling into his political center. He explicitly attributed his victories to Hachiman, ensuring the new administrative center was anchored in this clan-centered religious sentiment.
The construction of the Tsurugoka shrine in Kamakura, dedicated to Hachiman, that served as the main shrine and a potent political symbol.
It provided immense spiritual support for the more recently established contractual form of family and feudal feeling that defined the Kinin relationship. It really helped bridge the gap between abstract duty and a more personal spiritual allegiance.
Now, as the shogunate matured, the size of this Kenin class began to swell. It started to include not just the original allies, but also men recommended by powerful shugo.
Yes, and this expansion started to pose significant challenges to the rigid hierarchical structure that Yoritomo had established.
We should probably remember the fluid social landscape of the Kamakura period. The clear hereditary distinction between a professional warrior and a productive farmer, that wasn't really fully established yet, was it?
No, not at all. That comes later, formalized under the Tokugawa Shogunate. In this period, the term samurai simply denoted the upper echelon of fighting men, often men of property, who served a higher lord.
And as the Kinin status became more common, almost a formality for existing high-ranking samurai, the shogun faced a problem.
A huge problem. It became difficult to control the sheer size and ambition of the entire warrior class. It just wasn't feasible to manage the loyalty of every high-ranking Kenin directly anymore.
So consequently, the shogunate started to exercise strict control over the definition of the samurai rank itself.
Exactly. It proved politically easier to restrict entry into the lower ranks of the warrior class than it was to manage the political machinations of the already established high-ranking Kenin.
Is there any specific evidence for this?
There is. The single piece of historical documentation that best illustrates this anxiety over social mobility is an account found in the Azuma Kagami, the official chronicle.
Right.
The research shows that one of Minamoto's most prominent Kenin requested permission to promote a highly loyal foot soldier, a common man, to the rank of samurai.
A seemingly simple request, but the shogun refused it.
He did. And the reasoning, which is recorded in the chronicle, is profound. The shogun feared that if this man were elevated to samurai status, he would quickly forget his origin as a common foot soldier and immediately try to use his new position to gain Kenin status.
So it reveals a deliberate, active political effort by the leadership to maintain a strict hierarchical distance between the classes.
And to prevent rapid upward mobility from the agrarian base into the fighting elite, yes, the entire feudal system relied on stable inherited status. The shogun recognized that unchecked ambition could quickly destabilize the entire system of loyalty and land control.
Let's shift our focus now from the structural framework to the ideological one. We can examine the documentation of the warrior ideal. A key primary source here is the Azuma Kagami, completed around 1270.
Yes, the Azuma Kagami. It was compiled from official Kamakura government records and also the personal records of various nobles. It provides a descriptive account of contemporary samurai behavior.
Yeah.
It documents what the warrior class actually did.
And it portrays the expected martial qualities. Pride in ancestry, bravery, willingness to sacrifice one's life for the Lord.
Exactly. It's a historical record of actions and deeds. But a different kind of document emerges from the mid-13th century that moves beyond documentation and into the realm of prescription.
The Cocoon, the family instructions written around 1247 by Hojo Shigetoki.
Yes, and this work holds immense significance. It's really the first specific written example that closely resembles a formal ethical code for the warrior class.
The context is critical, isn't it? It's what differentiates the Cocoon from the later, more formalized Bushido.
Fundamentally, Hojo Shigetoki didn't write this for a rank-and-file follower. He wrote it for his son, Hojo Nagatoki, who was just 18 years old when he was appointed the shogun's deputy in Kyoto.
The highest samurai representative in the imperial capital.
The highest. So this was guidance specifically for leadership and political representation, not just simple followership on the battlefield. Nagatoki's mission was to represent the authority and legitimacy of the samurai regime directly in the presence of the sophisticated aristocratic courtiers of Kyoto. He was the face of the Eastern warrior class.
So given that delicate political mission, the instructions must have placed enormous weight on social conduct.
They did. Etiquette, good manners, maintaining an impeccable appearance, these were all emphasized as essential tools for political legitimacy. The samurai in Kyoto needed to command respect, not just through brute force, but through appropriate civil behavior.
But the most detailed sections of the Cocoon were focused on personnel management. Nagatoki was in command of the high-spirited young samurai known as the Wakato, or officer trainees.
And the challenge was that these watados were typically from the same social class as Nagatoki himself. They were elite sons of powerful kinin, not common soldiers. So they required careful management, respect, political shrewdness, not simple discipline or brute command. Shigetoki was preparing his son for the complexities of political administration in the capital.
What's interesting is what the instructions omit. Questions of battlefield courage, loyalty unto death, they're largely absent.
Exactly. And that speaks volumes. Those virtues were taken for granted. For a true son of Hachimon, as they were called, courage and loyalty were assumed to be inherent qualities. They were non-negotiable elements of their birthright.
So instead, the Kakun focused on general principles of moral and spiritual conduct required for governing.
Yes. The first of these principles was a mandatory belief in the gods and Buddhas, blending Shinto and Buddhist beliefs. Second was the untiring, constant practice of the martial arts to ensure readiness.
And the third.
The third, and perhaps the most complex, was an awareness of karma or fate. Shigetoki emphasized how one's actions in the present would directly affect the fate of future generations. This gave a warrior's conduct an immense weight.
Responsibility extended far beyond personal success or failure to the destiny of their entire lineage.
That's it. But the supreme emphasis, above all, was placed on giri duty or obligation and possessing a good heart. The father explicitly stated that these two qualities were like the two wheels of a carriage, necessary for forward motion and balance.
And the definition of giri here is critical. It's not just loyalty.
No, it's the complex web of duty, responsibility, and reciprocal obligation that binds a samurai to his lord, his family, and his position in society. Shigetoki underlined its ultimate importance by stating plainly that duty was the making of a samurai. This really shows the Kamakura elite were highly concerned with establishing an ethical framework for long-term political cohesion.
Valuing systemic obligation above individual heroism alone.
Precisely. And this concept of giri existed in a kind of continuous creative tension with ninjo, which is human emotion and natural inclination.
So the Kakun, by prioritizing giri, was teaching young samurai to subordinate personal feelings, fear, love, even revenge, to the greater duty and the political stability of the regime.
Yes, and that internal ethical struggle really defined the samurai ethos in ways that later codified Bushido formalized. But it originated right here, in the practical advice given to a young Hojo regent.
Now, despite the strong political framework Yoritomo established, the structure proved fragile at the highest level. Yoritomo himself failed to secure his succession. He was followed by two short-lived and ineffective sons.
And this internal instability led swiftly to the Hojo coup in 1203. Control of the shogunate fell to the Hojo clan. They were related to the Minamoto through Yoritomo's widow, Masako.
And what's fascinating about this transition is the Japanese cultural regard for existing institutions. The Hojo seize real power, but they maintain the formal structure of the shogunate.
Yes, they ruled from behind the scenes, effectively as regents, or shikin. They maintained the facade of the Minamoto shogunate for a time, and later installed puppet shoguns from the imperial family. This preserved the crucial legal delegation of authority from the emperor, ensuring the regime maintained its legitimacy.
And it was under this Hojo regency that the samurai system faced its most severe external challenge.
The attempted Mongol invasions of 1274 and 1281, orchestrated by Kublai Khan.
And to appreciate the scale of this threat, we have to place it in the context of the Mongol Empire. By this point, they'd established the largest contiguous land empire in history.
They had defeated highly disciplined military forces across vast distances. They'd conquered kingdoms from Poland and Hungary in the west, through Persia, all the way into Korea and China. These were forces that had successfully engaged and destroyed the heavily armored professional Teutonic Knights of Germany.
Japan's singular advantage, then, was the sea, a geographical barrier.
That was it. The Mongols, masters of cavalry and maneuverability on land, were forced to rely on a fleet constructed largely from the recently conquered Korean Navy and manpower. This forced them to cross miles of open ocean, a huge logistical and strategic disadvantage for a land-based military.
So the first invasion comes in 1274. A fleet with about 25,000 troops lands at Hakata Bay in northern Kyushu. And the samurai approach this using ancestral traditions.
Traditions rooted in centuries of internal warfare. They were expecting a duel of honor. The samurai ideal involved riding forward, challenging a worthy opponent by name, reciting one's pedigree, and then engaging in single combat.
which against the Mongols proved strategically disastrous.
Woefully inadequate.
Hmm.
The Mongol forces didn't honor single combat. They operated as cohesive, disciplined units, using coordinated attacks, signals, and devastating ranged weaponry. Massed volleys of arrows and critically rudimentary gunpowder firebombs launched by catapult.
Creating chaos and terror among the individualized Japanese warriors.
The fighting quickly devolved from ritualized challenges into bitter, desperate, hand-to-hand combat. And ultimately, the 1274 invasion was halted not by Japanese tactical superiority, but by nature. A fierce storm, possibly a typhoon, destroyed much of the anchored Mongol fleet, forcing the survivors to retreat.
But Kublai Khan was undeterred. The Mongols returned in 1281 with a vastly larger force, perhaps up to 140,000 troops.
A huge force, approaching Kyushu from two directions. Initially, the Japanese defended the beaches fiercely, even raiding the Mongol transports by night in small boats. But the sheer scale of the main invasion force presented the samurai with an existential threat. They faced being completely overwhelmed by numbers.
And it's at this critical juncture that the political balance between Kamakura and Kyoto becomes apparent?
Dramatically so. While the sons of Hachiman, the fighting samurai, were locked in desperate struggle on the beaches, the sons of the Sun Goddess, the imperial court in Kyoto, engaged in the only warfare available to them. Yes. In a significant act demonstrating their persistent spiritual legitimacy, the emperor dispatched an official envoy to the Great Shrine of Eyes to petition the sun goddess Amaterasu directly for divine intervention.
And as the narratives relate, few prayers have been answered with such immediate and catastrophic finality.
That same evening, an immense storm, a massive typhoon, developed over the sea and utterly destroyed the entire invasion fleet as it lay at anchor. Hundreds of ships sunk, tens of thousands of Mongol troops perished.
The remaining task for the samurai was just mopping up stranded survivors.
And the samurai, recognizing the magnitude of this deliverance, named the storm kami-kazes, divine wind.
An incredible military victory, but the immediate result was a profound political and economic quandary for the Hojo government.
It was. The fundamental problem of victory without conquest is that no new territory was acquired to distribute as a reward. Feudalism relies entirely on patronage. Service demands reward, usually in the form of land or office.
So the Hojo were in debt to every samurai who had fought, but they had no spoils of war to offer.
And the political pressure was immense because of the religious nature of the victory. Kyoto and the powerful Buddhist temples, they argued their prayers had been instrumental in summoning the kami-kaze. They also demanded substantial grants of land.
Which meant the Hojo regency was forced into the economically ruinous position of rewarding exploits from its own existing resources.
Yes, from the lands they governed directly. This rapidly depleted the central government's wealth and control.
And the samurai were insistent on getting their rewards.
Highly insistent. There's the famous example of the warrior Takazaki Suenaga, who went to extraordinary lengths to ensure his claim was acknowledged. He commissioned a detailed painted record of his exploits, the Mongol invasion scroll, specifically to back his demand for patronage and land.
And that scroll remains an invaluable artifact. It gives us crucial details on samurai dress, equipment, and tactics of the period. But his persistence really underscores the financial fragility of the Hojo regime.
It does. And the economic burden didn't end there. Coastal defenses had to be constantly maintained against the threat of a third invasion until as late as 1312. This added considerable strain to the Hojo's already stretched financial position, and it really set the stage for their eventual collapse.
The spiritual dimension we saw during the kami-kaze event was part of a broader religious and philosophical current sweeping through the warrior class during this period.
Yes, and the most significant influence on the samurai was unquestionably Zen Buddhism.
Zen, which gained powerful momentum during this era, stood apart from the older, established Buddhist sects. It encouraged personal, sudden enlightenment, or satori.
Right, achieved through rigorous meditation and discipline. It deliberately rejected the complex scholasticism and intricate rituals of the older sects.
And this form of Buddhism appealed directly to the warrior class.
It did, because it demanded a demanding physical and spiritual discipline, a regimen that mirrored the relentless military requirements of the samurai's calling. The pursuit of enlightenment was immediate, it required self-reliance, and that resonated profoundly with the warrior spirit.
The spiritual benefit it offered was transformative. It promised a cool detachment from the material world, a separation from care, worry, or fear of death.
And that mindset was perfectly suited to battlefield behavior, By achieving non-attachment, a warrior could face the certainty of death without flinching, making calm, decisive action under pressure possible. Zen provided an ideological foundation for enduring hardship.
While Zen had this unique grip on the military elite, the Kamakura period also saw increased popularity of other major Buddhist sects, like Nichiren, Jodo, and Shinshu.
Yes, and these Buddhist themes were deeply woven into the literature of the era. None more famously than in the Hike Monogatari, the classic war tale detailing the Genpei War. The work functions in part as a long, sophisticated Buddhist parable.
The Taira clan are portrayed as ultimately doomed. Their decline is attributed directly to wicked karma and evil deeds, particularly the destruction of temples during their campaigns against warrior monks.
The work portrays Taira Kiyomori, the head of the clan, as the ultimate villain, a victim of his own unchecked ambition and evil fate. There's a story that he once attempted to stop the sun from setting with his fan. This act of hubris is meant to symbolize the Taira's ultimate defiance of fate and Buddhist law.
Yet despite that moral judgment, the work expresses an immense sympathy for the end of their courtly era. It laments the extinguishing of their aristocratic life's beauty by the rough, militaristic Minamoto from the east.
Highlighting the transience of all worldly power, a classic Buddhist theme.
By the close of the 13th century, the cohesion Yoritomo had engineered began to dissolve. The financial strain of the Mongol defense was one factor, another was the internal political decay.
Specifically, the removal of the original Minamoto figurehead by the Hojo regency.
That Hojo replacement removed the crucial focal point of Tennin loyalty. The original glue of the system was Yoritomo himself, a charismatic, proven leader. The Hojo regents lacked that personal authority.
And the feudal contract, which was based on personal fealty to a warrior chief, started to unravel. Discontent was compounded by the failure to adequately reward the samurai after the Mongol invasions. So many Kenin began transferring their allegiance to the Shugo.
To the provincial military governors, this shift was crucial. The Shugo could now provide the economic support and immediate protection that the central government could no longer reliably guarantee.
Yes, so the Shugo were consolidating both halves of the feudal equation, military service and local patronage, at the expense of the Kamakura Bakufu.
Concurrently, the Shido, the land stewards, began exploiting the financial weakness of the center.
They started retaining larger and larger shares of the dues they collected, increasing their personal wealth and diminishing the resources available to both the imperial court and the Hojo government.
And this widespread resentment against the Hojo began to manifest openly by the 1330s. The force that galvanized this discontent came from an unlikely source: Emperor Go-Daigo.
Yes, who launched a determined effort to restore the prestige and power of the throne, intending to roll back a century and a half of samurai dominance.
His initial revolt in 1331 failed. He was captured and exiled.
But he managed a dramatic escape in 1332. His defiance and his freedom immediately transformed him into a powerful rallying symbol for all the discontented samurai clans who were eager to overthrow the Hojo regency.
The resulting revolt saw decisive military actions. The crucial Ashikaga clan under Ashikaga Takauji captured Kyoto, and simultaneously Nida Yoshisada led an expedition directly against Kamakura itself.
And the narrative surrounding the destruction of the Hojo received great symbolic value, rooted in the legend of Kamakura's fall at Inamorisaki.
The story recounts Nida Yoshisada approaching the city, finding its natural defenses impenetrable because the high tide was blocking his army.
So, the legend states that Yoshisada ascended a high rock and cast his sword into the sea as a prayer to the sun goddess Amaterasu to aid her imperial descendant.
And the tide miraculously rolled back, allowing the imperial forces to enter the city and destroy the Hojo leadership.
A powerful piece of symbolism. Once victorious, Go-Daigo established control in Kyoto, launching what's known as the Kenmu Restoration. His intention was a full return to direct imperial government, pushing the samurai back into a subordinate role.
His political missteps were immediate and profound, though. He alienated the very samurai who had put him on the throne.
He did. First, he appointed his son, Prince Morinaya, as shogun. Then, crucially, he replaced the powerful warrior-backed Shugo with specially selected civil courtiers.
That, combined with disappointing rewards for their service, was unwelcome. The samurai had supported Go-Daigo to replace an ineffective military regime, not to return to the weakness of the pre-Kamakura civil administration.
The resulting discontent inevitably led to a massive shift in allegiance. In 1335, Ashikaga Takauji, the leader who had captured Kyoto for the emperor, betrayed him.
Takauji chased Go-Daigo out of Kyoto and installed a different member of the imperial family, who then proclaimed Takauji as the first Ashikaga shogun.
Go-Daigo refused to surrender. He fled to the mountains of Yoshino, where he maintained an independent imperial government. This resulted in the establishment of the northern court in Kyoto and the southern court in Yoshino.
A schism that initiated the sustained civil war known as the Nambokucho War, which lasted for 60 years.
And the Nambokucho War produced one of the most enduring symbols of samurai loyalty, Kusunoki Masashige. Killed in 1333, Masashige is revered for embodying the perfect performance of all samurai heroics and demonstrating unwavering loyalty to the imperial southern court line.
His fame rests on the fact that he followed his duty, his giri, even when it dictated his certain defeat. At the Battle of Minatogawa, he knew he couldn't possibly win against the Ashikaga forces.
Yet he didn't waver. He followed his lord's command, culminating in a heroic harakiri, and his young son continued the fight, cementing Masashige's status as the ultimate paragon of absolute loyalty and self-sacrifice.
These long-sustained wars between loyalist clans like Kusunoki and the Ashikaga forced significant evolution in samurai warfare. Much of the conflict took place in wooded, mountainous terrain where horses were less useful,
which rendered the bulky, traditional Ayoroi armor, designed for mounted archers, inconvenient and obsolete. Samurai began rapidly adopting this simpler, more mobile Dumaru armor, which wrapped more closely around the body.
And the increased hand-to-hand fighting elevated the importance of the sword.
It transformed it from a secondary sidearm into the primary weapon. This required practical design changes, like lifting the helmet neck guard for easier movement. You also see innovations like the nodachi, a much longer sword, and more practical armor for thighs and knees.
Go-Daigo's rebellion, despite its initial success, inadvertently brought about profound, lasting political changes. It marked the very last attempt by an imperial family member to successfully overthrow the shogunate. Its failure fundamentally cemented military rule in Japan.
And Ashikaga Takauji's strategic decision to make Kyoto the shogunal capital, unlike the distant Kamakura, meant that all future emperors were kept under the direct, watchful eye of the military ruler. This ended the delicate balance of separated civil and military power that had defined the Kamakura period.
In a profound historical irony, Go-Daigo's effort to reestablish a unified imperial government resulted in the opposite outcome.
Yes, his failure resulted in a successor military government that was more military than ever when the Ashikaga took control, combining administrative and military authority in their own hands.
Go-Daigo also inflicted permanent damage on the imperial finances. He transferred many imperial family holdings to the public treasury. When he fled, these lands were permanently confiscated by the Ashikaga,
rendering future emperors financially dependent on the charity of powerful families and the shogunate. It ended the independent economic viability of the throne.
Finally, we should note the remarkable cultural afterlife of these figures. The example set by Kusunoki Masashige became a potent political tool, especially in the 19th century during the movement for the restoration of the emperor.
One of the earliest acts of the new Meiji emperor in the 1860s was erecting a statue of Masashige on the site of his final battle. This glorification peaked in the 1930s, where nationalist propagandists extolled him as the ultimate example of loyal, self-sacrificing nationalism.
And while the suicide pilots of World War II took the title kami-kaze from the divine wind, Kusunoki Masashige served as the human exemplar of their ideological endeavor.
That's right. The desperate suicide attacks on Okinawa were specifically codenamed Kikusui, which refers directly to Masashige's personal chrysanthemum crest. It ties that modern act of sacrifice directly back to the 14th century paragon of duty.
We have analyzed how the samurai system, founded on personal loyalty and pragmatic administration, rose and fell over 150 years. But the question remains, when Kusunoki Masashige chose certain death for a defeated cause, knowing the emperor's restoration was fragile, was his famous sacrifice truly an act of profound patriotism toward the imperial line? Or was it the ultimate desperate embodiment of Jiyu, a loyalty to a contract he knew was doomed, purely because duty was the making of a samurai? Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning something new. That's all for now, but in case you didn't notice, there are a lot more episodes on this subject available on this channel. If you're enjoying these historical podcasts, please like and subscribe and share it with other history buffs.
While this is an AI recording, the research that has gone into this production is comprehensive and focuses on very specific moments in history, designed to bring as much detail to the listener as possible. Thanks again for listening in.